Okay, should we start, everybody? Is everybody happy? Yeah. Okay. Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to the online Waikato District Council Candidate Information Evening. We're really pleased that you could join us this evening from wherever you are, the fantastic benefit of being able to host an online session. So in just a moment, I'm going to just run us through very quickly our outline agenda for this evening. But before I do, I would like to introduce our iwi Partnerships Manager here at Waikato District Council, Sam Toka, and ask him to open us up with a karakia.
He honore he kururia he maunga rungo ki te whenua whakaaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa. Glory and honour to God in the highest, peace on earth and goodwill to all men. Koe nei mātou e te atua e tuku whakamui miti ki a koe, ka tae mātou ai purangi ki te kōrero hia tēnei tō mātou kaupapa. We are grateful, our Heavenly Father, that we are able to come together on screen to share this candidate information evening. No reire e pātoa mātou matanui te rangi, koe nei mātou inoi ki a koe mana ki tia, I runga te ngā tautame hu kreiti tō mātou kai whakora. Bless all the thoughts and discussions that take place tonight, our Lord, in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Sam. Fantastic. Okay, so I should probably just introduce myself very quickly. So ko Emma toku ingoa. I'm the Communications Marketing and Engagement Manager here at the Waikato District Council. So I'm really pleased to be able to be your MC for this evening. That's my role this evening. So very quickly, our agenda for this evening's session. So I'll introduce our Chief Operating Officer in just a moment. And shortly after that, we'll be joined by Marley, who's the Electoral Officer at the Waikato Regional Council, and then by our own Electoral Officer, Dale, who will talk us through a bit of detail around the electoral process and what that looks like if you are interested in becoming a candidate for this year's elections. And then we'll hear from one of our current elected members, Councillor Jan Sedgwick. So Councillor Sedgwick will actually give us some insights from the coalface after serving quite a few terms as a councillor at the Waikato District Council. And then finally, we'll end with a Q&A session. So on that note, just a bit of housekeeping. So I won't have to tell you where the exits and the toilets are because you're all obviously virtual this evening, not in a venue, but I would like to just remind you about how you can get involved and participate in this session. So there are 3 ways to ask questions. So if you are joining us on the live stream on YouTube, you can make a comment. If you're here with us on Zoom, you can ask a question in the chat function, or you can wait until the Q&A session at the end. So when all of the presenters have shared their content, you'll be able to actually directly ask a question by raising your digital hand and asking that question. So if until then you could please all stay muted, that would be much appreciated. I'm very happy to take questions, as I said, on the chat or through the comments throughout the any of the content, but we will deal with all of those at the end. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Tony. Thank you.
Ngā mihi, Emma. Ko Tony tuku ingoa. So welcome from me to everybody. So my role tonight is to just share a bit about who we are as a council and what our key focus is right now. So for a little bit of context, we are a significant growth council. In fact, we're one of the largest growth councils in the country. We're home to over 86,000 people. And to be fair, that number is growing by the day. Just for a bit of context in terms of the size of our district geographically, so not a lot of people realise, but in terms of that size, we're only around 90% of the size of Auckland. But unlike Auckland, we have many small communities. So our largest community is probably around 7,000 people, and so that would be Huntly. And so we have significant challenges in terms of economies of scale. And just again, for a little bit of context, so in terms of what we manage as a business. So how about 12 skate parks, 51 playgrounds, 3 swimming pools, 55 public toilets, 21 cemeteries, 30 water reservoirs, and significantly, and I'll come back to this, 11 water treatment plants and 9 wastewater treatment plants. 6 libraries plus relationships with other councils. We maintain 1,800 kilometres of sealed network and around 600 kilometres of unsealed roads. 240 kilometres of footpaths and 113 parks and reserves. So we are a very large business in the context of the infrastructure and things that we're managing. But as I said, I wanted to come back to the 11 water treatment plants and 9 wastewater treatment plants. And the reason for that is that this, in terms of this whole economies of scale conversation, so a place like Hamilton City, for example, they would have 1 water treatment plant and 1 wastewater treatment plant. And so that really does provide the context of the challenge that our council has from a economies of scale perspective. So we are a very large business, $150 million worth of revenue and in excess of $2 billion of assets. So what you have in front of you now is, again, that context from a geographic perspective. So, so our district starts on the west coast, the north west of our district, sort of in Port Waikato, goes all the way across to almost to Kaiawa on the east coast near the Firth of Thames, down to Whangaroa and Raglan, and it wraps around Hamilton to Tamahere, Matangi, Woodlands, Gordonton, all the way up to Kaiawa again. So a significantly vast ward, of a district combination of rural lifestyle and urban representation. On the right-hand side, we have our community board map. So we have 6 community boards now, with the Tuakau Community Board, Port Waikato and Districts, Raglan, Ngaruawahia, Huntly and Taupuri community boards. And perhaps just at this stage, before we move on from the slide, put in a little bit of a plug for the role that community boards play in our district, and it might be a really nice opportunity for those of you who are interested in participating in local democracy, but perhaps don't quite have the time yet to be able to invest in being a full-time councillor. The community board might be a nice segue into politics, because you can still contribute and participate in doing things for your community, if that's what you really want to be doing. In terms of our governance structure, I think, yep. So this is the governance structure that the current mayor, with the support of the councillors, has put in place. So we have 1 mayor currently and 13 councillors, and we have, as I said, 6 community boards with 32 elected representatives through that process. So the current mayor and councillors have put this governance structure in place to help manage the business of council. So they have an audit and risk committee, and so that committee is the only committee of council currently that has an independent person or someone other than a councillor chairing that committee. And then, so the infrastructure committee, policy and regulatory and strategy and finance committees are the key governance structures or committees of council. And just probably the other one that I really do want to highlight is our joint management committee with Waikato Tainui. And so this is a committee that actually has a shared chair arrangement, and is a committee that has a collaborative work program between council and Waikato Tainui that they work on together on issues of common interest that we work on and progress in a sensible way. And that committee also meets on a quarterly basis. So the next slide I'd like to just reference is the council's vision. So this is a vision that was established by our councillors, and it really does underpin everything we do. It is the driving force behind everything we do. And if I just wanted to pick out a few of the sentiments when the councillors developed this vision, in terms of what some of these words actually meant to the councillors as they pulled this together. So livable communities are communities that are well planned and people friendly. They provide a range of quality residential options, social infrastructure, walkways and open spaces. And they reflect what's important to people and support a shared sense of belonging, both to the local community and the wider district. So that was what livable communities meant. So thriving communities are those communities that participate in council decision-making and community-led projects, put input into the management of their local assets and sustain local business sectors through providing local employment. And lastly, connected communities. So connected communities have fit-for-purpose infrastructure which create that livable, thriving and connected communities. Connectivity through roads, cycleways, walkways, and digital capability, which enables information to flow and engaging our communities and activities together. And by these means, the councillors believe that people in connected communities access services and amenities that meet their social, health, education and employment needs. So you can see that through this vision that was developed by council, it's very much underpinned by the 4 wellbeings which are embedded into the Local Government Act. So our challenges. So these are challenges that, for those of you that are interested, there's a pre-election report coming soon. That's both a scorecard in terms of what the council has delivered over the last 3 years, but also provides focus for the next period of time. And so these 3 challenges are referenced in that document. So the first one in terms of managing growth, and this isn't just about supporting owners of land or developers to carve up land and build houses, it's actually about building communities. So the vision that I just referenced, the council vision, the livable, thriving, connected community, is actually about building communities. But we have to do that in a way that enables us to keep the lights on, if you like. So we've got many millions or billions of dollars of assets that as a council we're required to manage sensibly and prudently, but also a number of services that we've got to deliver as well. But we've got to do that in a way where we're managing a sensible growth of the district. Affordability is the next key item. So, I referenced the economies of scale challenges that we have. Affordability is a big issue as we battle those economies of scale issues, and also, the fact that we have many diverse communities within our district. So we have some quite affluent communities, but we have some communities where affordability is a real challenge. And so we need to be able to balance those sorts of challenges. And we can't probably move anywhere without just reflecting for a minute on the impact of COVID-19. So like us all, and like many businesses in this country, in fact, around the world, we're also battling with the impacts of COVID, whether it be around securing resources, whether it be securing staff, contracting help, supply chain challenges, materials challenges, all those sorts of things are affecting our business too. And we need to be able to continue to move forward with providing our services and providing for growth with that backdrop. So that's one of the things that is certainly occupying our mind currently. The key opportunities coming up in the next triennium, so I've just sort of listed a few here, and we know that we're going to have some change around the council table. We know, for example, that we're going to have 2 new seats in terms of Māori ward seats. We know that we have a mayor that is not restanding, and we know that at least one councillor that you're going to be listening to soon excuse me, is not restanding. So we will have a reasonable amount of change around the council table. So we need to support the new councillors into the new business as quickly as possible so that we can continue with the business of council as efficiently as we can and as quickly as we can. Balancing that growth, that triangle between growth, maintaining assets and affordability I have referred to, and this is one of those constant battles, particularly as the cost of providing infrastructure is certainly not getting any cheaper. Reform, we have a lot of reform coming at us, whether it be the Waters Reform, the Resource Management Act reform, or the Future of Local Government reform. So the key thing is that we need to keep connected to that reform, participate in that reform, and then work with it when we understand, excuse me, when we understand that reform better, so that we can position our business to be able to participate and prosper in that reform as effectively as we can. Climate, not just the Waikato district issue, obviously it's a global challenge that we have, and our council has put a climate action plan in place, and we just need to continue to play our part in both in terms of adaptation and change to support our communities and to do the right thing by climate in terms of managing our footprint as best we can. And lastly, growing and strengthening our partnerships, particularly those partnerships with iwi and hapu are very, very important to us in terms of meeting our obligations in terms of the treaty and working with key stakeholders in our communities as we move forward. And the last slide, really just in terms of just reflecting on our governance model. So the roles that we're talking about here, these are governance roles. They are not management roles, but Waikato District Council or the current governance leadership has very much worked to ensure that the governance and operational parts of the business work well together, to the point that we actually work on projects together. And we use the example here of the blueprints, and this is a blueprint process where we have developed community blueprints. So these are things that are really important to our communities. It could be something from a business or economic growth perspective, could be parks or reserves, could be walkways, trailways. That's whatever has been really important to our blueprint to actually underpin the aspirations of those communities. And key councillors worked with the communities, supported by staff, to deliver on that blueprints, and it's certainly something that we believe has worked well, and it has become a model in our organisation where key councillors and staff work together to deliver on outcomes for our communities. So I'm happy to leave it there, and I think be passing over to Marley now, who's going to talk about working with the Waikato Regional Council. So over to you, Marley.
E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā raurangatira mā, tēnā koutou, i te kaikarakia, tēnā koe i matua Sam. Ko tai mai nei i tēnei pō, tēnei te mihi, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for the intro, Tony. Appreciate it, and thank you to Waikato District Council for the invitation to participate in your candidate briefing tonight. This is number 2 for us, Waikato District Council. We had our first session last night, so hopefully we're a team that is running like a well-oiled machine tonight. No doubt we will be, given our really cohesive presentation to those that were in attendance last night. Hey, it's a really good lineup, because all those that are lined up to speak to you tonight, we're all talking about the same kaupapa, but from a different perspective. And so hopefully the information that I share with you tonight is useful, and particularly for those who are considering putting themselves forward for election with the Waikato Regional Council. Tony has covered off some really useful information about council context. And a lot of what is shared already is relevant to all councils. So thank you, Tony. And I don't intend to dive into too much detail about council context generally. And after my presentation tonight, Dale Osowski, who is an expert in his field, will talk about council rules, processes, and the timetable. Again, the information that will be shared by Dale is relevant to all councils right across the motu, and so I won't be talking about any of that. Instead, I've prepared just a few slides to talk briefly about those things specific to Waikato Regional Council. And so starting first with the difference between regional and territorial councils. Why do we have 2 arms of council? You probably wonder that. And so just really wanted to highlight that regional and territorial councils do not have a hierarchical relationship where one tier of government reports to the other. Instead, the 2 arms of local government are have different but complementary functions. And so those functions that are delivered by the regional council are best delivered at the regional scale, and those delivered at the local councils are best delivered at the local scale. And so for Waikato Regional Council, this slide here gives you a diagram of our 6 priorities for the current term. They are water, climate, biodiversity and biosecurity, coastal and marine, sustainable infrastructure, transport connections. Hey, strategic priorities and direction are really important because they provide the direction, I guess, for the work programs that council delivers. And for those that are elected to regional council, you'll get the opportunity right at the beginning of the term, have a look at our strategic direction, review it and set the priorities that you think are important for the next 3 years. So a really important task. The regional council of business, $100 million per annum. So that's a big responsibility, and of course comes along with massive work programs. So lots of skills
Kia ora. Can anybody hear me?
I can hear
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Yeah, Mark, I can hear you.
Okay. I think is it Marley we've lost?
I think it's Marley that's lost the sound.
Okay. All right. Apologies, everybody. I think we were all just wondering for a minute there if it was us. So I think we've lost Marley. Perhaps Dale, could I ask you to jump in and speak to your slides until we can have Marley back?
Sure, certainly can.
Okay, I'll hand that over to you.
Kia ora tātou, everyone. I'm presenting more on the nuts and bolts matters, if you like, if you're considering standing as a candidate. So it's more the practicalities that I'll be covering off. Next slide. So Waikato District Council has about 55,000 electors with a population of about 86,000. Of those 55,000 electors, there are just about 47,500 on the general electoral roll and about 7,500 electors on the Maori electoral roll. So that gives you the ratio between general and Maori. We will be conducting elections for other organisations, for the Waikato Regional Council and the Te Kowhata Licensing Trusts. And just to note, from Friday, there will be no district health boards in existence, so we will not be conducting elections for DHBs this time in 2022. Elections are being held by postal vote and with election day closing on the Saturday, the 8th of October. And we will be using the first past the post electoral system for all organisations that the council will be conducting elections for. Next slide. So here's some key election dates. Nominations open on Friday the 15th of July, so that's not too far away, about 2.5 weeks away when nominations can open, and they close at midday on Friday the 12th of August. So there's approximately 4 weeks for the nomination period. From Friday the 16th of September, voting packs will be sent to all enrolled electors. And as I said earlier, key date is Saturday the 8th of October with voting closes at 12 noon, and we'll have results, progress results released early afternoon on that day. So they are your 4 key dates: nominations opening and closing, and voting opening and closing. So in 2021, Council resolved to establish Māori wards. And when a council does resolve to establish Māori wards, it's required under the legislation to undertake a representation review. So our council did undertake this, and that's a review of all the wards and boundaries and number of elected members and the role of whether to have community boards and subdivisions of community boards, etc. So it's quite an extensive process, but all councils have to undertake that anyway, at least every 6 years. So this resulted in 8 general wards being established and 2 Māori wards being established, electing a total of 13 councillors and 32 members from 6 community boards. So just for clarification about Māori wards, I've got 2 slides on this: eligibility to stand and eligibility to vote. So eligibility to stand in Māori and general wards, candidates standing for a Māori ward can either be on the Māori or general electoral roll, so you don't need to be on the Māori roll to stand, but must be nominated by 2 electors on the respective Māori ward electoral roll. So you can be either on the general or the Māori roll, but you must be nominated by 2 electors from the Māori electoral roll. Candidates standing for a general ward, again, similarly, can be either on the general or Māori electoral roll, but must be nominated by 2 electors on the respective general ward electoral roll. So the second slide with regarding Māori wards is eligibility to vote. So Māori ward councillors are elected by those enrolled on the Māori electoral roll. And I mentioned earlier, there's about 7,500 electors on the Māori electoral roll. And similarly, general ward councillors are elected by those enrolled on the general electoral roll, and there's about 47,500, and they'll be split into general wards. So here's a listing. I won't run through them all, but here's what elections are required. So we have the mayor elected right across the district, elected at large. And then we have 13 councillors from those 10 wards that I've listed there. So they're largely 1 or 2 member wards. We have 2 Māori wards, each electing 1. And you can see the map there to the right there, and there's a red line running through the middle, and that differentiates between the 2 Māori wards, and each colour represents a separate general ward. Next slide. And similarly, we have the 6 community boards there. So community boards do not cover the whole district. They're restricted to around localised communities, and there they are listed there. We have a community board, the Rural Port Waikato, that is subdivided, and that's divided between a north subdivision and a south subdivision. So they each elect 2 for the total of 4, and that's permissible under the legislation to have a subdivided community board, to reflect individual communities. So next slide, thank you. Electoral rolls. There are 2 electoral rolls. Most people don't really realise this, but there is the resident electoral roll, which makes up about 99% of those electors that can vote. And on the resident electoral roll, a person must be a New Zealand citizen or permanent resident, aged over 18, resided continuously in New Zealand for 1 year or more, and at an address for 1 month or more. And this data is provided by the Electoral Commission, so it's joint enrolment. So when someone enrolls for the parliamentary roll, we just simply get a snapshot of that one. So there's 1 electoral roll, and we get a snapshot of that to use for local elections, and they do a really good job. And the second roll is the ratepayer electoral roll. So this really is for non-resident ratepayers. So a person may live outside the district. They may live in Auckland, for example, but own a property in Waikato district. They can enrol to be on the non-resident ratepayer roll and get another vote or a second vote. So they get a vote for where they live for all the issues, and they're able to get another vote for their property that they may own in Waikato district, for example. So this is by application, so it's not automatic, so people do have to enrol for that process. And as I said earlier, it's quite a small number, and there's only about 80 on that roll currently. Candidate eligibility. So all candidates must be a New Zealand citizen, aged 18 or over, and you must be enrolled on any parliamentary electoral roll. So you don't actually have to be on the parliamentary roll in Waikato district. You can be anywhere in New Zealand. You can be in far north, for example, and stand in Waikato district. So that's been around for a long time, so that's quite open. And you can stand for multiple positions. So you can stand actually for the mayor, for the council, and a community board if you wanted to. If you are elected to multiple positions, then you take the highest position. So if you stand for the mayor and council and you're successful in both, then obviously you take the highest position, being the mayoral one. You can stand for more than 1 community board if you wish, and can actually be elected to more than 1 community board if you so wish to, if the people elected you to more than 1. There are some restrictions. You cannot stand for the Waikato District Council and the Waikato Regional Council. That's quite specific in legislation, so you must choose. You can't stand for both. And similarly, within the council, within the district council, you can only stand for 1 ward. You can't say, well, I want to stand in the Māori ward and I want to stand in a general ward. You must choose which you want to stand in. Candidate qualifications, again, elected members or their spouses. You can't have a contract with the Waikato District Council over $25,000 in any one financial year. You can seek dispensation, if you like, from the Office of the Auditor General. So there's ways that you can achieve that exemption, but that's something that potential candidates need to be aware of if they have long-term contracts with the council. For the Te Kaupata Licensing Trust, you must be a resident elector of the area. So it's different from the council, where you can be on the parliamentary roll anywhere in New Zealand. For the licensing trust, you actually must live and be on the parliamentary roll within the area of the licensing trust. If you're an employee of the Waikato District Council and you stand and you are successfully elected to the council, then you must resign as an employee before taking up that position. So you can't, it's a conflict of interest, so you can't really be doing both as a staff member and as a governance member or elected member. It's not applicable for community board members. So if a staff member wishes to stand for a community board and was successfully elected to the community board, then they can retain their role as an employee and an elected member. So, remuneration. So this is an interesting topic, or we get a number of questions about this. So there you see that if you're elected as mayor, you can get just over $150,000 per annum, and the deputy mayor just over $81,000, and it comes down to councillors around $44,000, and you can see there that the chairperson gets a little bit more. Community board members quite low at $2,000 to $5,600, but if you're community board chairs, then you can go from $4,000 up to $11,000, just depending on the size of the community board that you're being elected to. So on to the actual nomination process. As I said earlier, nominations open on Friday the 15th, and papers will be available from council offices and libraries. From the website, so you can download those, and you can phone the 0800 and we can post one out to you if you really wanted to. And for Waikato Regional Council, there's their phone number, their 0800 number, and that's their website as well if you wanted to download one for the Regional Council. Next slide, thanks. Just remember, you cannot nominate yourself. So you need to be nominated by two nominators from the area you're standing for. So if you're wishing to stand for the mayor, then you can have two electors from the whole district that can nominate you. But if you're just standing for a smaller area, community board, for example, Ngaruahia Community Board, for example, then you must be nominated by two electors from within that community board area. Each nomination requires certain things. So for each nomination, there is a nomination deposit of $200, which includes GST. It is a deposit, and most people will actually get that deposit back if they poll greater than 25% of the lowest successful candidate. So there is a formula in there, and as I said, probably 95, 98% of candidates actually get that deposit returned to them. There is an option for each candidate to submit a candidate profile statement. It is optional. We strongly encourage all candidates to submit this because it goes out with the voting documents and it goes to every elector, and it really just provides the candidate with an opportunity to talk about themselves and what they want to see achieved if they get elected, etc. So it's a really good way of promoting yourself that's free to the candidate and gets into every voter's home, if you like. So with that, you can have 150 words in English, plus you can have 150 words in Māori. So you can actually have 150 words in English plus 150 words in Māori. So you can actually have a total of 300 words. But there is a but, of course. The Māori must be largely consistent with the English version. So it's really just almost a translation, but not quite, but just largely consistent. You are able to have some other languages if you so wish. You can have Tongan and Samoan or whatever languages you choose, but they must total 150 in total, 150 words in total. You can also submit with your nomination a passport size colour photograph. We do stress that it must be recent. So within the recent is defined within the last 6 months. So that should be submitted as well. And again, It is optional, but we strongly suggest to all candidates that they do submit the photograph, because that's what electors out there, they look at the profile, what you say, and of course what you look like is a big thing as well to some electors. So it's really important to have both of those, in my view anyway. And the last thing there is evidence of citizenship. As I said earlier, you must be a New Zealand citizen to stand. And we do now require evidence of that just to protect yourself as a potential candidate. We now need to see that, you know, yes, you are a citizen, that ticks the box. We can move on. There can be no sort of errors and things like that later on with someone that's not actually eligible. Affiliations, so candidates can have an affiliation, and that's defined as a group or organisation. So if a group or organisation that you represent, you can have that name shown alongside your name or your candidate name. If you don't want anything, you want to state that you are independent, then you can certainly say that you're an independent candidate, or a number of candidates just simply leave that blank. There are some rules around this. There are some affiliations which I will not accept. I will not accept a slogan. I will not accept anything indecent or slanderous. So it really has to, you really have to represent a group or organisation for that to be accepted. So return nomination papers to council offices and libraries. So all parts, all components of the nomination have to be submitted together. So your nomination paper, your deposit, your candidate profile statement and your photo all have to be submitted together in one go. And just the final point there, the nominations close at noon on the 12th of August. I do say they close sharp at noon. There are no ifs, buts and maybes. If you come in at 1 minute past 12, we cannot accept your nomination. So come in earlier the better. Don't leave it to the last minute would be my plea. If there is a mistake in your nomination paper, and you're leaving it right to the last minute, there is simply not enough time to get it fixed. So bring it in with plenty of time. We can check it, staff can check it, and if there's a problem such as a nominator that is ineligible and you may need to get another nominator, then there's plenty of time to get that rectified and not sort of running around at 2 minutes to 12. Campaigning. So campaigning can occur any time. So there's no time restriction on this. So you can be campaigning now. However, there is some restrictions through the council's bylaw on election signs. So this is restricted to 2 months out from the election. So that's from the 8th of August that election signs can go up, but must be removed by midnight on the 7th of October. Any election advertising that a candidate may do, and that might be billboards, flyers, social media, newspaper adverts, whatever it is that you do, must show an authorization statement. So currently under legislation, that must be the principal place of residence or business of the person authorising the sign. There is a bill before Parliament which we expect to be passed this week or by the 1st of July, which broadens those contact details that must appear. So it can, assuming it's passed, that can be a phone number or probably better a email address or a website address that links someone back to how someone can contact the candidate or the candidate's agent. So the authorization statement can come from a candidate or their agent. So that's something to just bear in mind, that it is a bill and it just broadens that. And it really does, is designed to protect, I think, the personal details of candidates. And it really means that you don't need to put your place of residence, for example, where people can track a candidate down for malicious purposes or whatever. It can simply be an email address. And I do say here in my last point, be mindful of election offences. There are a number of them in the legislation in the Local Electoral Act. Be mindful of them. so that you don't fall into the trap of committing an offence, because sure as eggs, other candidates will be watching you and watching what you do. And if you do do something wrong, they'll be on top of you and to me to lay a complaint, and of course they then go off to the police to deal with. So on to campaigning still. Social media, great way to campaign. Really encourage it. It's free, it's far-reaching, so it has really positive aspects to it. I do say that council media channels and resources are off limits, so that can't be a resource made available to candidates, as council must be politically neutral in all situations, and council does monitor the social media outlets as well to make sure that it remains neutral. So there are some social media guidelines in our candidate handbook, so have a look at those if you've got any further questions around social media guidelines. Candidate expenditure. So there are limits to what a candidate can spend set by a government, by legislation, and I've listed those there. So, for example, it is based on the population of each area. So, for example, the mayor with 86,000 people can spend up to $50,000, including GST. And if you're looking at the Huntley ward, for example, that's only $7,000 because of the size of it, and the Newcastle Ngaruawahia ward, general ward, is $14,000. So it ranges from 7 to 14,000. And then for the next slide, we'll look at the community boards, and that ranges between $3,500 to $7,000. And again, it's all determined by the population size of the particular area. Nearly there. Just some explanation around the candidate expenditures. They are GST inclusive, so don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, it's plus GST, I've got a little bit more to spend. It is GST inclusive. You can't add limits together, so if you're wanting to stand for the mayor and a particular ward, for example, you can't add those two figures together to get $65,000 or $64,000. You take the higher one only, and if it's the nearer one, that was about 50,000, I think. So that's what you can spend. There is an electoral expenses and donation form that is attached to the nomination paper. It's also in the back of the candidate handbook. That must be completed. Please complete that by the due date of 9th of December, even if it's a nil return. So we need it back from everyone, even if it's a nil return. It does go up on the council's website and is available for public inspection for 7 years under legislation. So my plea is, make sure that your return is accurate. It is a declaration, and people do actually check check back that it is correct. Voting period is 16th of September to midday on the 8th of October. Voting packs are delivered from the 16th to the 21st of September. So look out for in that brief period, a 5-day period. As I said earlier, you're able to campaign up to and including election day. So it's not like parliamentary elections where you actually can't campaign on election day. With local elections, it's postal voting, so you can actually campaign on election day as well, because there are a number of people that will still vote on that Saturday morning. In fact, it's getting more and more prevalent that a higher number of people will forget to vote, and all of a sudden they'll get reminders through the media, etc., on that Saturday morning, and they'll still turn out and drop off their vote to a local council office. Do not collect voting documents from electors. Please don't do that if you're a candidate. Don't go around to rest homes, for example, and get voting documents off residents in there. There's actually an offence to have in your possession someone else's voting documents. So just bear that in mind, and it's just a no-no to do. So electors can post back or drop off to those sites there to council offices at any time during the voting period. And we will also have special votes at those council offices as well, where if someone hasn't got their vote, their ordinary vote, it's gone to an old address, or they've just turned 18 or whatever reason, they can actually still apply for a special vote and cast that up until the close of voting, which is, there it is, at noon on Saturday the 8th of October. Again, I say sharp in there because there is no leeway under legislation. At midday on that Saturday, voting will close. So if you come running in at 2 minutes past 12 with your vote, we cannot accept it by law. So it is very tightly enforced, and we'll simply be turned away, no matter what the reason is. If you stuck in traffic or something like that, 12 noon is D-Day. Results, have progress results at approximately 2 o'clock on election day, and that's about 95% of the votes cast. So that will exclude, it'll be all votes cast, excluding those votes hand delivered on election day morning and special votes. So the following morning, on Sunday morning, we'll have the preliminary results, and that will include the votes hand delivered on the Saturday morning, but will exclude special votes. They go down to the Electoral Commission for validation on the Monday morning, and we'll get those back on the Wednesday night, and then we'll declare a result on the Thursday afternoon, late afternoon, on the 13th of October. Candidates or elected members take office the day after the first public notice. Public notices are now no longer required to appear in newspapers, so it'll be the day after the declaration appears on the council website. And newly elected members can act after being sworn in at the first meeting. So there's our contact details. There's myself there, the electoral officer, and there's Gayleen there as my deputy. So there's our contact details. So if you've got any questions or queries or any concerns, please feel free to give us a call or email me or Gayleen, and we're more than happy to answer any queries. So that's it from me. I'm sorry, I probably sounding quite boring, but as I said, it's a little bit of the nuts and bolts, of do's and don'ts of what you can do as a candidate. So I'm now going to hand it over to Jan Sedgwick, Councillor Jan Sedgwick, to talk about being her experiences as an elected member. Kia ora.
Thank you. Thank you, Dale. And it always amuses me when you describe yourself as nuts and bolts, because it's actually the really serious stuff. But what I'm here to do is, like, think of me as like the councillor whisperer or the council ninja. So what I'm going to cover is what's involved, what sort of skills you might find useful, and actually the inside story of what it's really like to be a councillor. So like you, I was 12 years ago thinking about standing for council, but unlike you, we didn't have these presentations, so it's really an honour to be part of them. So what you're probably thinking now is, look, I'm going to stand for council. I'm going to cut rates. I'm going to chop into the spending. I'm going to get stuff done in my community, because it always gets forgotten. And I'm probably going to get rid of some of the staff, and I'm going to keep my job. And actually, pretty much a lot of that was what I thought, not all of it, because I looked on the council website and I saw that there were 5 major meetings a month, 4 committees and a council meeting. And I thought, yeah, I can do my own job. That's fine. I can. So what I discovered after I was on the council, got elected onto the council in my first year, and I sat there and I looked at my name tag on the desk and I thought, oh, what have I done? What I did find out, actually, you can't do any of the above things. Found out there was a whole lot more reading. There were many, many more meetings. So what you'll get is a whole new perspective on things like rates, revenue and expenditure versus budgets, long-term plan priorities, which is where your pet community project might sit or it might not sit. And no, you can't fire staff. And actually, no, it's a full-time job. So you probably have to put that one to the side as well. The really cool stuff about council as a councillor is you've got the normal governance role. And normally when you have a governance role, you have governance versus management. So governance is the big picture. It looks at the strategy, it looks at the policy, it's the financial oversight. It looks at things like, what are the external impacts? What are the what are the legislative impacts, and understanding how a council works. So, as I said, pretty much a full-time job. Management is what our staff do, and we do not get involved in what the staff do. And that's normal, governance, management, and that split. However, where a really funny twist comes in is we also have representation. So while you are elected to represent your district, your ward, and your constituents' wants, needs, desires, aspirations, you're also, once you're elected, you also look after the whole district. So that's where you flip into the governance role of your project might be useful and practical for your ward, but actually when it comes to the whole big picture, it just doesn't stack up. So you have to grow up and be a bigger person and understand how that works. So what's involved? Because you're probably sitting there thinking, I'm really not too sure what's going to be happening here. So it's meetings, it's pretty much meetings. And those meetings can be briefings, they can be workshops, they can be committee meetings, they can be council meetings, they can be steering group meetings, they can be advisory group meetings, they can be community meetings, you name it, you're probably going to be at that meeting. There's a lot of preparation to what we do. So you've got a lot of material to read, and generally a rule of thumb is to allow about an hour for about each hour of a meeting, and that's a council or committee meeting. It's probably going to take you about an hour per hour of meeting to do your preparation. So don't think, though, that you're going to be tossed in like some little cork in the ocean and not know what you're doing, because there's actually a really good process within the council. And that generally starts off with what we call workshops. Well, everybody calls them workshops, but they're workshops. And that's where the staff come to you as council, and they say, look, we've got this draft concept on something that we're doing. Here's the options. What do you think? And so there's a really good opportunity then to have a very good free-for-all on what the challenges are, what the questions are. And from that forms up your opinions, which lead into a committee, a committee meeting. And then from those, recommendations go forward to the council. So you're not alone. You are literally not the cork in the ocean. You will be guided through it, but you need to keep up with the play and do your reading ahead of time. You're also going to have community work and community meetings that are going to be outside council. They're not organised necessarily by council. They are random. They might be ratepayers wanting to meet with you for something. It might be an organisation wanting to talk to you. And you need to manage your time to fit those in, because as you can imagine, we're a really big district, as Mr. Whitaker has said, and it's really geographically challenging if you're in a significantly large ward, as I have been and others on the western side are. You've got a lot of driving to do. Some of them, it is driving at night, and some of them are really meetings that you probably wish you didn't have to go to, but you do. Big question, how much time is this going to take? And a really short answer, a heck of a lot more than you think. It's generally, rule of thumb, lick your finger, hold it in the air. It's generally about 20 hours a week on governance issues. That's council generated meetings. It's about 20 hours or so on representation issues, such as community meetings, talking to ratepayers, writing your social media posts or writing your columns for newspapers or whatever you're doing. And there's other meetings, of course, if you've got council responsibilities. Now, that's not every day and it's not every week, but that's a pretty good idea that you're going to be spending 50, 60 hours a week, a lot of the weeks on stuff. You're almost certainly going to get a day off a week and maybe part days off a week. But again, that comes back to my point that I was making earlier. This is a full-time job. If you're going to do a professional job with your ratepayers, representing your ratepayers with the best interests at heart, it's a full-time job. Now, Dale's covered the money. We all think it's not enough. What I should say, though, is it's set by the remuneration authority. So Contrary to urban myth, no, we don't sit there and vote ourselves a large sum of money to do very little. The skills you're going to need. You're probably sitting there thinking, well, okay, so I understand I'm going to be spending a bit of time. You know, am I good at stuff? Nobody's going to manage your time. You've got to figure out your own time management. You've got to be pretty keen on reading a whole bunch of stuff. I actually did a speed reading course. I found that incredibly useful. It will eat into your evenings and it will eat into your weekends. So you need if you've got a family, you will need a really good partner. Ideally, one that can cook. That's a big bonus. And you do need family support. And you need somebody that will answer the phone at 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday night and be professional to the person ringing with their issue. You've got to have some flexibility. You've got to cope professionally with the unexpected meetings, the ratepayers meetings, or the meetings that staff might want to have to resolve some issues. I mentioned reading before. Here's some of the cool stuff you're going to be reading. And actually, maybe I need to get more friends, but I think they're cool. Their long-term plans, their annual plans, their government directives, not so good. Their financial reports, their infrastructure policies, and there's bylaws. Now, bylaws we consult on, so you also need to be involved in that consultation and setting the consultation documents. And you're also involved in the hearings. So that's sitting there and making decisions that affect all of our communities. But again, you will be helped through it. The council Waikato District Council has a brilliant induction program. Again, we did not have that 12 years ago. Sorry, maybe we did, not so good. Now it's really, really good. So you'll be helped through all this. You're not going to be just dumped in and expected to make instant decisions. And actually you can't. Probably a good idea if you're fairly IT savvy, although again, we can train you because all the information is uploaded to a council supplied iPad or laptop, whatever. Other things you need to probably have is skills, collegiality. If you can't get along with people, or you can't get along with your 13 colleagues, or you can't get along with ratepayers, you're probably not going to be effective and you're probably really not going to like your job. So you've got to like people and you've got to be able to talk to people and have fun with it. You've also got to be able to approach public speaking. I know it's the thing that a lot of people don't like doing, but you need to put on your big person pants and do it. So you've got to speak up in the council, otherwise you're going to be forgotten, left in the corner. You're going to be recorded like we are tonight. You're going to be on YouTube forever, like I am tonight. And you're also going to be talking at functions, and it may be often quite ad hoc and quite unexpected. So my one piece of advice for you is if you're going to a function and you think you might somehow have to talk, think about it ahead of time. Always a good idea. Coming to the end here, I think you need an inquiring mind. What is the government's legislation that makes council do? How does that affect the budgets? How does it affect our levels of service and what we do for our ratepayers? What's the best practice? What are other councils doing? What can we do? How can we do it better? All of those questions. Have an inquiring mind and think about options and think about ideas. That's what you're there for. So to the slide, pros and cons, and yes, there are both. Your life is public and you're always a councillor, 24/7. I'm sorry, it just is what it is. Meetings will be called when you have other appointments. That just is life and it happens. Talking about life in the public, ask any sitting councillor and they will tell you they go to the shops. Somebody asks them about the potholes. It's always about the potholes. You can be taking the dog for a walk. You can be watching your kid at rugby. Again, there's going to be questions. Up to you how you deal with them, remembering you're the professional, you're the community leader. That's why people are voting you there. So my suggestion and my philosophy is you're there to serve the ratepayer. So that's how I approach it. Social media. Now we all love social media. It's our friend. It helps you get information across. It's also your worst nightmare. So think about how you're going to communicate with your widespread communities of interest. It's a great way to communicate, and it's an absolutely damning way some other times. So just be really, really careful about what you do. Those are the cons. The pros. What's so cool about it? I personally think it's really, really cool. I'm sad to be standing down, but I do wish everybody that's coming on all the best for what you're doing. This is a job. It's a cool job. It's a fun job. It enables you to shape the communities and to shape the districts. How many other jobs give you this? It's a really big time of incredible change for local government, and it's a time of change for how the council approaches how we work with our ratepayers. And Blueprints, which Mr. Whitaker mentioned really early on, is a really good example of this, where I was fortunate enough to be on the steering group for Blueprints, which is where we've gone out to our local communities. We've talked to them about what's important to them, and then we've worked out ways through our funding review of how to fund these things, how to make ourselves more accessible to the communities and to listen to what our communities want. You'll work with a great group of people, councillors and staff, and they'll change your life. Some of them will change it for the better, some won't, but that's life. But you can make a real difference, and you can make a difference in the council-resident relationship. You can be part of something bigger than yourself that's got really significant long-term effects. And I think if I can leave you with one thing, it is don't just sit there, do something. Thank you all for taking part. Congratulations to all of you who are thinking of becoming a candidate, and good luck to you all. Thank you. Back to you. I think maybe Marley is back now on. I noticed Trans asked for more generation to avoid disruption. They clearly didn't get the message.
Yeah, Marley, would you like to jump back in, and I can flick back to your slides?
Hey, thank you. I will do just that. I will. For the technology malfunction earlier, I'll leave my camera off this time to get as much out of my broad width at home as possible, and hopefully get through my presentation without any further disruption. Fingers crossed. So let's skip then to the next slide, this one right here, which is a picture of the area or the rohe that Waikato Regional Council covers in. So as you can see, it's massive. It stretches from Bombay Hills or Port Waikato in the north, all the way down to Ruapehu in the south, Coromandel over in the east, and then on our west coast, Moko. So quite a large area to cover. Our Waikato Regional Council rohe is made up of 6 general constituencies, from which we will have 12 elected members or councillors elected. So that's the map that you can see on the left, and then on the right, 2 Māori constituencies, 1 seat within each, 2 Māori councillors. I may have missed some of the kōrero by the time I got back onto the presentation, onto the webinar, but I know that Dale was covering off some information about Māori wards and the rules, I guess, and the processes around that. I just wanted to acknowledge Waikato District Council for the introduction of Māori representation this time around, and to share a bit of insight into Waikato Regional Council's experience of Māori representation. It's been in place now for 3 terms, so almost 9 years, and our 2 Māori councillors have the same role and responsibilities as all other councillors, and so contribute to decision making in all areas of council, but they also bring a strategic Māori lens to decision making, and so this has resulted in positive change over time. Something that you've got to look forward to. Moving on to the next slide then. And focusing in on the election as it relates to the Waikato District Council Rohe, we have positions to be contested in the Waikato General constituency, so 2 seats there, and 1 in our Ngaho e Whā Māori constituency. With regard to time commitment, let's talk firstly about the chair. It is generally a full-time position, and unlike our local councils who elect a mayor, for a regional council, the chairperson is selected by their peers or by a resolution of council. The chairperson has the same responsibilities as other members, but they also take on additional responsibility around leadership. And so the chairperson presides at all council meetings and ensures that the conduct of business is orderly. They also act as the spokesperson for regional council and ceremonial head, and they also provide leadership and feedback to other elected members in their roles. So it is a significant additional responsibility, and it is generally a full-time position. All other councillors meet on a monthly basis and or as required, and so the I guess additional responsibilities for each councillor really does depend on what committees and subcommittees they are appointed to. So they meet on a regular basis, and they look closely at issues and make decisions and recommendations to council. Here at Waikato Regional Council, we meet on a monthly basis, and that is the last Thursday of each month. Our meetings are generally within office hours, so Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. But as Councillor Sedgwick has shared, there is a lot to deal with, I guess, in the role of an elected member, and really interesting and useful and well-informed insight provided by Councillor Sedgwick, so thank you. I won't go into any further detail there. Just quickly, what does the role of elected member pay for regional council? As mentioned earlier, Remuneration Authority is the independent body that sets pay for all elected members across the country. But to give you an idea of what you might expect if elected, our chairperson is on a salary of just over 163,000. Our deputy chairperson, approximately 86,000. And for a councillor without any additional responsibilities, just over 64,000. And so I think I will wrap it up there, moving on to my last slide, and just really put a further plug in there. If you are interested in receiving more information about Waikato Regional Council and or would like a candidate information handbook and or a direct kōrero with me or someone in my team, then please do get in touch, give us a call, or access further information on our website. That's it from me. Ngā mihi kia koutou, and back to you, Emma.
Thank you so much, Marley. That's fantastic. I'm glad that you could rejoin us. It's just, it's always the way, isn't it? When you do something digital, there's always one person who gets booted off or whatever. So, but I'm really pleased you could get back in. So apologies to everybody for flicking around in this presentation. It's quite difficult digitally to kind of keep up because you normally use people's body language or they give you the eyeballs across the room. So yeah. We're going to move on now to our Q&A section. So I believe there are some questions that have come in. I can't actually see those. So if somebody in the room, Ali or Grace, wants to jump on. I do believe there's something there for you, Councillor Sedgwick. I believe it's a question around, could you share that, Ali, please?
Yes, absolutely can. So the question here for you, Councillor Cedric, is what is your favourite part of being a councillor, or what's been the highlight of the last 12 years?
Oh golly, there's been a lot of highlights. There's been quite a few lowlights, but there's been a lot of highlights. I think probably the main one is a fairly generic one, and that's helping people when they're really tangled up in red tape. And you can come along with your magic scissors, which are actually called intelligent staff finding correct solutions, and you can untangle them. And it's such a simple thing, but actually it's such a big thing, and that makes you feel really good. Highlights for me are enabling the climate to have an audit and risk committee, which I'm really, really proud of. Also, a personal highlight is becoming an RMA commissioner and sitting on the district plan, which is a really big piece of work that we did over a good 2 years as well, and that was a highlight. There's a lot of little highlights. There's a few really big ones, and there's always some ups and downs. I hope that helps.
Thank you. So what else
we also have another question here, which actually is probably a good one for you, Councillor Cedric, which is around what would your best piece of advice be to someone who is new to a governance role?
Take a deep breath. Genuinely. And I've found that in literally in other boards that I'm on as well. People are there who know a lot more than you, but don't let that daunt you. But listen to that wisdom, because that wisdom has been gained over a period of time. And listen. I think listening and getting information, equally staff have an enormous amount of information. The role of staff is to support you in what you do. So they're not your enemy. We don't do arguing with staff. We do, here is an issue, how do I resolve it? So that you get the outcome that you need for the issue that's being raised. So my advice is probably take into account some of the things that have been said tonight. You know, you're not going to go in with a flag and change the world. Councils and local government is very process driven, and you're never going to change that, but you are going to be able to make small incremental changes that actually make a real difference in your community.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, there's a question here. I'm not sure who this one is for, so feel free to jump in. So with the implementation of the new Māori wards, will we still be keeping our Mangai Māori?
Mr. Whitaker, I'm going to toss that one to you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cedric.
You're very welcome.
Look, so I guess ultimately this is a decision of the new council, but what we can say is that the current council really value the input from the current Wanga Māori representatives, and there's no reason why the council couldn't choose to keep them, but that will ultimately be a decision of the new council.
Okay, awesome, thank you. A question for Dale. What's the purpose of the candidate information statement? Where is it shared and distributed?
So the 150-word statement that goes out with the voting document, so in with the voting pack, and is distributed to every elector on the electoral roll, and it's really a good summary that the candidate can use to promote themselves and get their messages across out to the voters.
Excellent, thank you. I don't see any others. Ali or Grace, do we have any that have come in through other channels?
Nothing that I can see. I think Dale's covered off a few of the other ones that we received via Instagram a bit earlier today, but just to reiterate on some of those. So when somebody's asked if they were to help people with their votes or collect the voting documents of others to send in, so can you just clarify that one again for us, Dale?
So our advice is no, don't do that. It's actually an offence to have someone else's voting document in your possession. Just be mindful, you just never know who may be watching you in an electoral campaign. And it just takes another candidate to observe a candidate doing something like that, collecting votes off electors. And then there's a formal complaint made to me, and of course I must forward that on to the police to investigate.
Okay, I
And
think that's pretty clear. That's a no-no.
And the other one just being to clarify again, so do you need to reside within that ward or community board area to stand for the ward or community board?
No, you do not. You can live anywhere in New Zealand and stand for a particular area, but you must be nominated by 2 electors from the area that you're standing in.
Okay, I don't see any more coming in. So I think we'll call it the end of our session. I'll just flick back into the presentation. Bear with me. We've got one last slide just to share. So in a moment, I will hand over to Sam and ask you, Sam, to formally close us with a karakia. But before I do, I'd just like to thank everybody for joining this session this evening. I hope you found it really informative and it's given you some really good food for thought. We will have 2 more events if you did want to come along and have a physical event. We will be in Tamahiri tomorrow and Pokino on Thursday evening. You can find out more information both about those 2 events, and you can also access this recording on our website. So www.waikatodistrict.gov.nz. And if you do have further questions, as Dale already mentioned earlier, you can forward those to him and also to Gayleen Kanawa, who's our Deputy Electoral Officer. So the details of all of those things and a myriad of other information is available on our website, and the pre-election report will certainly be up there by the end of the week as well, with lots more information for you to read. So thank you very much. If I can hand over to Sam.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much to those who presented your presentations tonight. E te atua kaharawa, ka tuku whakamoimiti mō ngā whakamāramatanga e pāna tēnei kaupapa. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the information that was shared tonight. E te roa ake o tēnei pō, kia tau mai te rangi Māori e tōkaha me tō aroha. As the night falls before us, we ask that you'll grace us with your peace, your strength, and your love. Amen. Pō Māori e, kia ora tātou katoa. Good night.
Pō Māori e.
Thank you, Sam. Good night.